thanks so much for coming out. When Maria and Rhonda asked me to do this presentation, so here it is. Please be patient and understanding because I have a lot to cover in and out. Over 30 years ago, I mentioned to my lifelong friend Dee that I was going to write a book about our deep and supportive friendship. This, therefore, is the result of 30 years of research and 7 years of writing. This is the story of House of Broel. In my book, I do personal things as well, but not today. This is all on the House of Broel. As I was doing the work on my genealogy, on my father's side, the most famous Broel platter I learned about is remarkably a woman, Amelia Broel Platter. She became known as the Joan of Arc of Poland. In 1830, she dressed as a boy soldier and with the help of her cousins, planned an uprising against Russian rule. The rest is Polish history. After almost a year on the battlefield, she died at the age of 25 from sheer exhaustion. By March 1832, she had been immortalized in poetry, and even a central street in Warsaw is named after her. This is a picture of Amelia's grandparents' estate with a picture of a museum that is dedicated to her. When people come to visit the House of Broel, I begin my tour by telling them the most interesting fact, that the original house is upstairs and was built in 1850. Then in 1884, the family that owned the house loved to have big parties and family entertaining, and they felt they didn't have enough space in their house, so they just jacked it up and added the first floor. The room on the second floor that was used as the original gentleman's parlor is the room that I dedicated to my father's memory, and I always point out his home in Russia, where he was born and raised, became fascinated with frogs. When he grew up, he was forced to serve in the Tsar's Russian cavalry. When he was in the cavalry, there was a massacre in the marshes. This slide shows us depiction of that horrible battle. A finger was taken off with a bayonet, and he was hit in the back of the neck with a bullet. He felt himself dying. All of a sudden, he was picked up on a stretcher and brought before the German commander. The German commander said, "Oh my God, it's Albert." They were the first cousins. So instead of executing him, he put him in prison. When he was well enough, he allowed him to escape, and that's how my father came to America, somehow to England. After coming to America, he served out the rest of the World War I, fighting for his new country. After the war, Albert moved to Detroit, Michigan, which was the American city that he thought had the most promise, and opened a medical practice there. That's how he met my mother when treating her for cancer. This is my maternal grandparents. My grandfather, Edward Tepper, was born in Heidelberg and was a fine carpenter and builder. His wife, Matilda Schultz Tepper, was born in Alsace-Lorraine. They arrived in America in 1903. This picture shows them with their first child, my mother, Olga. Due to Henry Ford's successes, money flowed through the region, and as Detroit prospered, so did the Tepper family. Together, Edward and Matilda became an enterprising pair as they built and sold houses and made a good living. My parents were married in Detroit in 1924 and went on a European honeymoon where they purchased a magnificent cabin in Belgium. It's one of my most treasured possessions and sits in a place of honor at the end of the Grand Center Hall of House of Broel. My father never gave up his love of frogs, so when he lost his second fortune in Detroit after the Great Depression, my parents moved south to Metro New Orleans and leased a two-story building at 531 Metairie Road, which is now the location of Winston's Pub in Metairie. His business grew so fast and furious that by 1932, he purchased a property on Jefferson Highway that ran from the highway all the way back to the Mississippi River. He built a magnificent 110-foot wide office building at 3800 Jefferson Highway. It became such a popular place that people used to picnic on the weekends. That is my mother, father, and stepbrother in front of the Frog Farm. That was my dad as a young man. I never knew him looking like that because he was 50 years old when I was born. So. It's hard to say I never saw him looking like that, but that's two of the many beautiful labels that he used to canvas different products. So we have frog a la queen and frog legs a la king. Here's his frog brochure, which I think is such fun. I'm so glad I found that so that I can show it to you folks today. This is in front of our bungalow on a frog farm property, welcoming me to my new world. So this is the frog farm workers. Not long after my birth, my parents took me to Detroit. Because of my father's failing health, my mother's insistence, and my stepbrother's trouble with the law, my parents decided to move back to Detroit. With the money with the sale of the frog farm, they invested in an apartment building and a post office. This apartment building is where I spent most of my childhood. My parents and I had a first floor apartment, and my grandmother and aunt had a basement apartment right next below. It was difficult for me as a young child to have to answer to three women and behave in front of the tenants all the time. So I was delighted when my parents and I moved into a two-story, white-frame, single-family house just for a short period of time. I remember relishing in the new comforts of living in a house all to our own. I now had a backyard for the first time in my childhood. However, every meal I ate as a child was at my German grandmother's dining room table. In addition to the kitchen in the apartment building, Granny was queen of the laundry room that had an old Singer sewing machine in it. That's where Granny taught me how to operate this magnificent instrument. I hadn't yet learned how to read, but I quickly learned how to sew. Granny was a stabilizing force in my youth. Perhaps we were each other's lifeline. We gave and received through love. Granny, in fact, was my first true love. I knew that something horrible happened to my stepbrother, and I didn't want to leave and go away from my parents like he did. So I tried to be good. I tried never to cry. I started school. I learned to read. I especially enjoyed adventure and animal stories. I learned how to draw. Dogs at first, then ladies in beautiful dresses. There were great other things I learned as well. My seriousness trained me to observe in silence. I learned that my stepbrother might come back and kidnap me to get money from my parents. I learned never to talk about him, to never talk about fear. I was never allowed to go any place by myself. I always had to have a chaperone. As I grew older, I mastered restraint and concealed my emotions well. But I also learned about God, the only friend to whom I could show my tears. Later, when I was old enough to sing in the Northern Baptist Church choir, I learned how to thank God repeatedly for never having betrayed me when I was frightened or sad. I learned how to accept gifts from the tenants graciously and how to, without crying, hand them over to Mother, who would store them safely away. I learned that a girl like me who was going to become a businesswoman didn't need a baby doll as a gift. A girl like me was going to grow up and be tough and strong, like Amelia Broel Platter, or another of Mother's heroines, the Baroness Madame Picardo, who survived the murderous gunshots of her father-in-law before becoming a shrewd New Orleans builder and businesswoman. I hid my sketches and my sewing in Granny's laundry room, for I had learned from Mommy that artists are immoral, and seamstresses were on the lowest rung of the social ladder. And if I were to please Daddy, I had to do well in school. At the dinner table, every night he would say, "What did you learn today, Mommy?" And I would have to come up with an answer, because if you didn't learn anything today, you might as well not be alive, because knowledge is what life's all about. But the good news is, unfortunately, my daddy's heart condition worsened But when I was 7 or 8 years old, and since my parents still had connections in New Orleans, they decided to move back here for the winters, so his blood could thin naturally. My parents bought a 2-story house at 101 Fairway Drive, so our backyard was a Metairie cemetery, where my friends and I would have picnic lunches. The largest tomb we discovered was built by Daniel Moriarty. When I pass it still today, I say, there's faith, hope, and charity, and Mrs. Moriarty. But my favorite tomb was the one that had an Egyptian pyramid. After my 12th birthday, Mother was diagnosed with colon cancer and was convinced that there were no good doctors in the South. So they sold that house and moved back to Detroit. So here we go again. Because of the constant traveling, I never finished school, one full year in any one school. Illinois was our state of transition. Adjusting was made easier there by savoring our time in Chicago, the hub where we always switched trains when we traveled between North and South. Chicago became a bridging landscape between our two worlds. Forged mainly by the shopping areas and the Hollywood films, here North and South, East and West, all converged, connected by Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. I still remember the first musical Mother took me to. It was The Student Prince. As long as I had movies, books, museums, and fashion shops, I could adjust to anything. Our stays in Chicago were never long enough, but the hub city still afforded me the time to prepare for what would come next. There's my ugly duckling, my mother would say, catching me as I passed by the room where I was chatting by friends. While she's not very pretty, Mother said on more than one occasion, Bonnie has a good head on her shoulders. When we moved back to Detroit for Mother's surgery, the coolest thing that my parents did was take me out of public school and send me to Grosse Pointe Country Day. There people lived in manor houses and owned corporations. For years I had been ridiculed as the rich kid, but at Grosse Pointe the student body viewed owning an apartment building as lowbrow. Somehow I'd gone from rich kid to poor kid in a summer's time. Oops, sorry about that. I finally made it through one full year in one school, but it was tough. Mother's surgery was successful, and Detroit was having constant worker strikes that made living conditions very difficult. So I pleaded with my parents to move back to New Orleans. They agreed. And we moved to the Jungle Hotel while looking for our next house. Daddy always wanted a grand home on St. Charles Avenue to remind him of the home where he was born and raised. But Mother would not hear of owning a large house that had to be maintained. So we finally moved to number 1 Maryland Drive, just 2 blocks from 101 Fairway. That's when everything changed for me. I even became popular in school and even started dating a Navy man that I met at the Jungle Hotel. When Mother moved back to New Orleans, Mother became obsessed with Mardi Gras. And since my father was a Mason, Mother had a connection to the Muslim Mardi Gras Ball Association and used her influence to make me a maid in the ball in 1955. She also arranged for me to reign as queen the following year. She enrolled me in an etiquette course that taught me to behave like Egyptian, European royalty. One day after class, Mother complained to my instructor that I had been wasting time sketching figures and designing set props, and that I had fallen down on my typing practice. She asked if Bonnie would just be serious. She would make a wonderful secretary, don't you agree? The instructor's eyes then turned to me and she said, no, Miss Broel, I don't see it. I don't see Bonnie behind the desk. Are you saying Bonnie doesn't have what it takes to become a secretary? My dear, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that anyone can become a secretary, but not anyone can be an artist. On the day my instructor stood up to Mother, she became my earthly guardian angel. For the first time, someone put Mother in her place. I had a feeling this moment wouldn't last long, so I took advantage of it. Mother, may I have the sewing machine? And she looked away and sheepishly said yes. So that's how I got my sewing machine. My classmate and I won a statewide competition for costume and set design, and I had my picture in the paper for the first time. Beauty and fashion were always my greatest desire. Here is a picture of the prom dress that I made for myself with my new sewing machine. So here I am, Queen of Muslim in 1956. I designed a magnificent gown with a huge hoop that turned out to be horribly uncomfortable. Instead of putting me in a bench like I thought they would, they put me in a chair, and I couldn't sit down. So all evening, as you know, the king can get up and dance, but not the queen. She has to sit there. So I'm sitting in my barely, but with myself on this chair and having to balance on my feet the whole night. And I was, by the end of the night, I was in pretty bad pain. But anyway, the next year, as you can see, I designed a very straight, simple Okay, my daddy's business advice. As I grew older, Daddy would give me advice. And it was very, very good advice. I've lived by it my whole life. If you ever start your own business, realize that it takes 3 years to break even and 5 years to make a profit. Don't take on a partner. Always own your own property. That way, a landlord can never go up on your rent, and keep your ideas secret. It seemed that I was always bargaining with my parents. After I finished high school, I wanted to attend art school in New York at the Fashion Institute of Technology, but of course, Mother wouldn't hear of it. So I agreed to attend Soule Business School if I could go to Newcomb Art School. However, when she found out that there were nude models in one of the classes, she took me out of Newcomb and brought me back to Detroit to attend Detroit Business Institute. In Detroit, I begged Daddy to let me have one summer at Cranbrook Academy of Art, which is a haven where art, nature, and beauty come together. After my summer in Cranbrook, I kept my word and went to Detroit Business Institute. After Christmas, we went back to New Orleans, and I finished my secretarial studies at Soule Business College. That's where I finally got my business degree. After I graduated, Mother introduced me to the son of the captain of a Mardi Gras ball organization called Orpheus, named Harry Mendelssohn Jr. When Mother realized that the family was not as well off as she thought, she and I had a major confrontation, and I ran away and got married. My husband and I moved into a double on Vesper Street, and I met a wonderful angel who I would come to know and love as Aunt Lou. She introduced me to her daughter, Carolyn Feetier, nicknamed Dee, who contracted polio in high school and was queen of homecoming in an iron lung. Since I met Dee when I was pregnant with my first baby, we became close friends. She introduced me to her former nurse, Chipper, who was getting married, and I made my first bridal gown for her in 1963. Shortly after, I made my first tailored suit and evening gown, which you see right here in the slide. Okay, my husband's family was Harry Mendelssohn Jr. with his family. They delighted in my passion for fashion and helped to nurture it by encouraging me to help in the production of their carnival ball. I served as a designer for the court costumes, and I designed and made my own formal carnival gowns as well. I even made my father-in-law's black and gold brocade captain's costume during the first year of our marriage. We don't have time for me to go into all the details, but by the time I was 24 years old, I had been married twice, had 2 children, and had started my own business. I rented a shotgun house on Fern Street in 1965, and Hurricane Betsy soon followed. After Betsy took almost everything we owned, I had to run my business part-time and return to work as a legal secretary. I put my sketches in fabric stores to encourage more business. One day, I noticed that the 2-story townhouse at 1507 St. Charles was empty again. The asking price for the house was $25,000. Due to a faulty title, the owner had been renting instead of trying to sell. I told one of the younger attorneys in the office about the house and asked him for his help. He showed me how to do research on the chain of title, and once I discovered the missing link, he was able to clear the title with little effort. In the meantime, I told Daddy about the house. We had always dreamed about owning a house on St. Charles Avenue. At this late point in his life, He wanted to see that dream come true for at least one of us. Even though my townhouse wasn't the grand mansion he had envisioned, he gave me $1,500 cash from his private savings. I offered the full price with a small down payment and agreed to put $5,000 worth of improvements within the first year. The owner agreed. Mother always preached a woman is no good without a man. But I was out to prove her wrong. My father called every day asking about when my sign was going to go up. When I told him it was finally up, he sounded relieved. This was proof to him that I was finally on my way. The next day, October 23rd, 1967, my daddy died. Here's a picture of the front of 1507 with my assistant Beatrice standing in front, along with my business card that has a family coat of arms on it, which made Daddy so proud. During the time I owned 1507, I remarried and had my third son. Wow. Right? Two items for the decor I chose from my new salon were a chandelier that had once hung in Christian Dior salon. Now it hangs in the dressing suite of 2220 St. Charles. The second one is a large gold mantelpiece mirror that is pictured in the next slide. Wow. I designed and made the evening gown for the 1967 Miss New Orleans pageant to get free publicity in the newspaper. The other picture was featured in the Tulanian, was the publication for the university. My first fashion shows were at ladies' luncheons at the Metairie Country Club and the Shrine Temple. I designed and made all the outfits myself. However, I soon realized that in order to grow, I had to buy from other manufacturers. So I invested all my savings and bought my first 6 dresses from a New York company that were made of silk and wool blend that was popular in the 60s. Fortunately, my husband JP attended a dental convention in New York and took me with him. While there, I visited all the manufacturers' showrooms that I had learned about from his aunt. When I returned to the store, my traveling sales reps told me that I was selling more than any other department store in any of the department stores in my area, and I needed to start buying the big ticket, the bridal gown. So this is a picture of the very first bridal gown I bought. It was bought from Amadone, and it started a new fashion trend, which I call the great American tradition, the beautiful House of Broel bride, and carried out that theme in my numerous ads. After 5 years of 1507, just like Daddy predicted, I was making money and had outgrown the space. I noticed that the house at 2220 St. Charles Avenue was for sale. The Liberty Shop operated there for almost 50 years, a long one for any business. They made debutante Mardi Gras Queen's gowns, and it was the same business where I tried to get a job 10 years earlier when I was going to school at Soule. My walkthrough confirmed there was something special about this house. Here at last was my opportunity. Having set foot inside the mansion, I felt there was no turning back. Though the house had been vacant for only 2 short months, it appeared to suffer from years of neglect. I learned that the 2 women who had inherited the business had been arguing, and now they weren't speaking to each other. Therefore, each woman had hired her own selling agent and attorney. This meant 3 different real estate agents plus 3 separate attorneys had to come together to negotiate the sale. Time was of the essence. However, when I finally got everyone to agree, I had to postpone the signing of the papers until we had the bright moon because of my advice from my granny. In selling 1507, I had more than doubled my original investment, which enabled us to begin the desperately needed renovations. Since my growing business needed more help, Aunt Ruthie moved from Detroit to New Orleans to be my secretary and became an enormous asset. My larger floor space required more inventory, so my traveling sales rep said that I needed to attend the Dallas market. As large as 3 football fields brought together, the marketplace was housed in an enormous 4-story rectangular building called the Apparel Mart. It was overwhelming. You can get some idea of the scope of the place from the floor plan on the slide. People always ask me, Bonnie, what's your favorite dress? And I couldn't answer that question until I found this old picture of me wearing an antebellum gown that I had made to attend a ball at Neighbor Plantation. Unfortunately, like so many gowns at this time, it is gone with the wind. I look forward with great anticipation to 1975. I told the Times-Picayune reporter who came to interview me in early January. The article the reporter told me would offer views of New Orleans' most prominent industrial, financial, and commercial business leaders. When the Times-Picayune published the Economic Outlook feature, I noticed immediately that, out of 13 other successful entrepreneurs interviewed, I was the only woman on the page. My inclusion among these men meant a lot. It meant I had finally reached the top. In November of that year, I did the first fashion show in the newly opened Superdome and received wonderful press. Just as Daddy predicted, after 5 years in business, I began to make money. So I designed and built my second store at 4608 Veterans Boulevard in front of my husband's dental office. I styled it to be a mini version of the Grand Mansion on St. Charles Avenue and a 4th of July grand opening 46 years ago. It's hard to believe it. Again, I received very good press. By 1977, I had done many fashion shows, but I had never done a show featuring just wedding attire. So when Adler's Jewelry Store asked me to partner with them to promote their bridal registry, I decided to give it a try. The fabrics of the time were all soft and flowy. There were lots of jersey and chiffon. In the winter months, hoods with fake furs became all the rage. Can you believe I found that old picture? My husband, JP, and my 2 youngest sons participated as well. This was the start of what would become a twice-yearly extravagant show that soon outgrew the ballroom at the Royal Sonesta. I did shows at the Hyatt, the Marriott, Hilton Riverside, and the Sheraton. By the late 70s, my success with House of Broel's 2 locations ranked my business among the top 25 best-selling bridal fashion stores in the country. Averaging 25 brides a week, on any given Saturday, 200 or 300 romantics would walk through the doors of House of Broel. To keep pace with the times, I employed 45 salespeople and seamstresses between my 2 locations. Modern Bride magazine even invited me, all expenses paid, to be on a selection committee for a promotion in their magazine. The Times-Picayune featured my September trip as the cover story in its bridal pullout section, January 21st, 1979, called Return to Romance. Unfortunately, romance was not in my future with JP because of his jealousy of both me and my business. So we divorced. I kept 2220 St. Charles Avenue, and he kept the Metairie property, becoming my landlord. Finally, by 1979, both my stores were showing a profit. Now that I had some money to invest, my accountant suggested buying another property as a tax write-off. I remembered the building that was across the street from 1507 St. Charles. I had watched the corner house be torn down, but its sister house at 1508 was still standing. I had always wanted to save it from a similar fate, and here was my chance. The timing was ideal for making an investment, because we thought the oil boom would last forever. For my November 2nd birthday, I purchased 1508 in 1979. I signed the sale in the morning, and by the afternoon, my paint crew had begun working. I was falling in love with the old building, and Gus Menard, a wholesale grocer that I met at the Blue Rose Ball earlier in the year. I was able to open my new fashion landmark on a limited basis by June of 1980, and remarried in July at 2220 St. Charles Avenue. Clark and I settled into our new husband's Mississippi ranch, making it our second home, but our first would remain on St. Charles Avenue. One weekend in New Orleans, Clark and I attended a fundraising event at McGee's Girls' School that showcased dollhouses and miniatures, and that is what started our building of dollhouses. For the 15 years I lived part-time in Mississippi, I worked on them in a wonderful workshop that overlooked the bayou and never had to clean up. It was great. I did all the decoupage, wall covers, drapes, and floors. It was a great stress reliever. I don't think it's cheaper than drugs, but it's a lot better for you. The following year, the big news was the royal wedding. And the dress Princess Diana wore changed wedding fashion completely. We went from the soft flowing fabrics of the 70s to taffeta, satin, organza, and potoslog. Puff sleeves became popular with long trains and lavish beatings. We went from the picture at the middle of the slide to the styles pictured on the right. My Albert's wedding, my son Albert married Carolyn Fox, February 27, 1982. They had the reception at House of Broel. He was also responsible, excuse me folks, for renovating the Victoria Mansion, and he wrote our computer program. Cheryl and Rachel Welker. In addition to doing my own bridal shows, I would partner with others in the industry. So the following year, I participated in a bridal show sponsored by videographers Warren and Cheryl Welker. After the show, Cheryl and I relaxed by the fruit and cheese station. We both wanted to be the exclusive vendors in any bridal show in which we participated. I asked her, what would it take for us to agree to recommend and work with each other exclusively? Cheryl said, peel a grape for me. After peeling the grape, I held it up for her close inspection. When we both erupted into laughter, I knew this was the beginning of a fantastic business partnership and lasting friendship. The alliance Cheryl and I formed over 40 years ago is still honored today. In fact, she is doing the show at Lakeside Shopping Center July 30th and 31st, and her daughter Rachel is a valued employee. They're both here somewhere. Cheryl was one of the videomakers. In 1983, I came up with a line of bust inserts to fill out the bust lines of the girls who were refusing to wear bras in those days. That was my first patent, and my creation became very profitable. I manufactured in Poplarville, Mississippi, and also opened a store there for a short period of time. Thanks to the oil boom, the fashion industry at the time was enjoying a similar high to that of Hollywood's golden age. But this high didn't last. The oil boom took its toll. Worst of all, a price war was rising up between retailers that would soon threaten to steal my enthusiasm. At the St. Charles Avenue store, I continued to carry my higher priced gowns. However, I changed the Metairie store's name to Bridal Bazaar, as you can see over here, and held constant sales. Buying from those stores that had gone bankrupt, I offered brides to be some terrific bargains. The best during the sale I called Moonlight Madness. We began the sale at noon and kept it going till 10 that night. Dresses sold for $99. Customers stood in line for the fitting rooms. By the time the sale ended, I had sold exactly 90 dresses. On this cash and carry basis, I continued to make a decent profit. My wise restraint did not save me entirely from the pressures of the time. Discounting became uncontrollable when I felt forced to look for new ventures. As a result, in 1987, I got talked into buying a beauty pageant. Big mistake. But I was trying and trying times. In the middle of all this pageantry, my mother suffered a stroke. After a short hospital stay, she passed away in June, a month after my final pageant productions. I knew how to put on a show, but I'd never come in contact with such a world of exploitation. With my inheritance from Mother, I was able to pay off a lot of debts. Going through Mother's boxes piled high behind the drape in the cathedral-ceiling living room, I realized there was a lot I didn't know about Mother's life. After a week of unpleasant discoveries, I felt that exerting such energy was not worth my time. Once I had unearthed Daddy's memorabilia from under Mother's heaps, I gave up sorting and brought the rest of her boxes to the curb. Mother's story had ended, but I knew my father's story had to be told. Since the discounting trend in the retail industry had gone out of all proportions, by the end of the 80s, it was almost impossible to show a profit. Although I was hailed as one of the most successful businesswomen owners in New Orleans at the time, and House of Broel's location operating among the top 10 best-selling stores in the bridal fashion industry. At the close of 1 year, our sales were $1,700,000. It's a lot of dresses to sell.
Wow.
And we lost $200,000.
Wow.
And the average price of a wedding gown went from $2,000 to $800. In addition to operating 5 different businesses during the week, I now managed over 45 employees. I was also having computer systems installed in both stores, and my employees were not happy about the change. Fortunately, my son Albert, who was also a bookkeeper for the store, was fascinated by the new technology. And with my input, wrote an excellent computer program. He recently told me, unfortunately, he's not here, he got COVID 2 days ago. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. But he said we bought our first computer in 1985 for $5,000. It was an IBM AT. I started vocalizing my concerns for the bridal fashion industry at markets and in conversations with colleagues. In doing so, I discovered how widespread the problems were and how many stores were declaring bankruptcy. I knew I needed a way to prevent my own stores from going under, so I stopped discounting and just went back to being our best service in town, okay? So, I even started my own House of Broel magazine, proving once more that House of Broel was the place to go for wedding attire. The centerfold showcased House of Broel St. Charles and stated, "You deserve the best is House of Broel." By 1990, I was ready to share my views with the entire industry. So I wrote articles and attended sales and motivational seminars and spoke in regional markets. The most memorable seminar I did was at the Dallas Mega Market, Friday, March 23rd, 1990. I'm standing on a stage facing a variety of my colleagues from around the country. At this point in my life, I've accumulated 20 plus years in the bridal industry, and House of Broel has been hailed a success. I've learned how to sell, how to merchandise and advertise. Today, a whole retail industry wants to hear from me, and I am honored and eager to speak. After an hour's lecture, I make some solid points and end my talk by asking, any questions? Miss Broel, since you are supposed to be the big shot. Big shot? Who said I was a big shot? What one thing do you attribute to the reason that you're here today? One thing? That's pretty hard. As I see it, the secret to my success is my ability to change. I told him that I was installing a new computer system in my stores, despite the resistance of my employees. I find myself talking about my childhood, how as a young girl who was bounced back and forth between Detroit and New Orleans for years, I was forced to embrace the idea of versatility quickly and with grace. I felt this adaptability was the key to my success, the ability to change when necessary, and to see new visions of the future. After the seminar, I could tell I was being productive when I saw others gaining from my ideas. I felt I learned as much as my audience. My father would have been pleased to see me finish my day with this new knowledge. I continued marketing House of Broel while producing large bridal shows, where the door prize was for one lucky couple would win almost everything from her wedding, including a honeymoon. And with my influence in the industry, I was able to bring in famous guest designers. Here is my ad for Demetrius, who was the highest designer of the day. I was able to get one of Cheryl's wonderful videos transferred to a jump drive so that I could show you one of our bridal shows. The ceiling of the Sheridan Ballroom opened, and for the finale, the models would release the balloons. Let me bring your attention back to 1508 St. Charles Avenue. Remember that in 1980, I opened as a fashion landlord and then remarried. After we moved to Mississippi, I realized how difficult it was to run 3 stores while commuting, so I leased the building to a caterer. In 1991, when his caterer went out of business, I had to learn a new trade. Since his calendar was full of upcoming wedding receptions, I couldn't disappoint those brides, so I learned the business as fast as I could. Since my husband was in the wholesale food business, he helped me. I found the act of entertaining people perfect for my personality. I have always loved to entertain, and I enjoy seeing people have fun. So I continued booking parties and receptions long after I fulfilled my obligations. This was the highlight of my career, winning the Rose Award, which is Retailer of Style and Excellence. And I won it in 1991. The award ceremony and formal dinner were held in an elegant Dallas private club. I invited my husband, my son Albert, Aunt Ruthie, my managers, and my friend Cheryl to be part of the event. It was a glorious evening with glowing congratulations from manufacturers, sales representatives, fellow retailers, Elegant Bride Magazine, and Dallas Apparel representatives. I felt like retail royalty. I'm sure that an actor winning an Oscar couldn't be more excited than I was that night. In 1992, I received the Lifetime Achievement Award. You can see my picture right over here, and it's kind of beat up because it got trashed in that nasty old Hurricane Ida.
Oh, no.
But we're going to have it fixed and have it reframed. And then I have the national ad, which I think some of you have seen on the table, the national ad that says, "Don't take chances with the most important day of your life." After my awards, I started to rethink my business and realized how much I enjoyed entertaining. I was now getting to see my brides having fun instead of witnessing all the anxieties before the wedding, and I wanted more. So I decided that I would restore 2220 to its original glory so that weddings and receptions could be done on the first floor, just as I had done years before. And I moved the bridal salon to the upstairs rear portion of the building, which worked out well. When the restoration was complete, I invited the Waters and Water sisters, the two top fashion designers in the industry at the time, to my home. Together, we hosted a fantastic in-house show. That same year, House of Broel appeared on the top 25 women-owned companies in the city. Although I enjoyed seeing my business listed, I knew that bigger is not better, and that volume has nothing to do with profit. After all of this wonderful recognition, the unbelievable happened. My mortgage lender went bankrupt, and a group of investors bought up my mortgage. Acting on the advice of my CPA, I stopped making payments and put my beloved home on the market in June of 1992. For a year and a half, I wrote letters to the people who owned my mortgage and miraculously had no offers on the house. My attorney said, "You'll probably have to declare bankruptcy." Bankruptcy? House of Broel was a success. But my money was all tied up in inventory and I was cash poor. The bankruptcy did not seem to be my answer. I went from bank to bank until I finally found a postcard on my desk that said if I ever needed anything, to call the bank's president. So I made an appointment. He told me to put my proposal in writing, and by January 6, 1995, the bank had worked out a permanent agreement. It took 2 long, agonizing years, but somehow through it all, the house had given me precious hope, even when everyone else had told me there wasn't any other choice. I was grateful. So I organized another Renaissance celebration, and it reintroduced House of Broel's flagship store in January of 1995. Timed just right, the occasion would prove to us that the upscale customer was still alive and well, and very interested in House of Broel's full-price, full-service salon. After the event, the Times-Picayune published a brief profile and sketch of my accomplishments in the living section of the paper. The article highlighted 30 years of my work and impressed me as a local entrepreneur, acknowledging my long dedication to the community. I was grateful for the good press it helped to secure my place in the Garden District. And as you see, many of you have seen the pictures down there of Anne Rice. I designed the wardrobe for her for an international book signing event in 1995. She had a mock funeral from Lafayette Cemetery No. 1 and had a second-line parade at the Garden District bookstore. In the casket, she wore one of my wedding dresses. She hosted a fantastic costume ball at her mansion on Louisiana Avenue called the Mountain Ball, and here I am pictured with the gown I made for myself to attend the event. 1996, I felt that God was tapping me on the shoulder, trying to get my attention. And when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I felt him slap me in the face. I had been living under such enormous stress that it was a wonder disease didn't strike me earlier. I was fortunate to have as my primary care physician Dr. Charles Mary, who was a strong advocate for integrative healing. He gave me my first book called Beating Cancer with Nutrition. I agreed to go for surgery in June with follow-up radiation treatment. I knew that unlike chemotherapy, these two methods would not be invasive of my whole body. Pictured here is one of my monthly wellness meetings that were held at House of Broel and a book signing. As I recovered from breast cancer, I started modifying my lifestyle. I realized that life is too long to be miserable. I also put all of my advice for the different vitamins and minerals and a list of the reading material in the back of my book, so if anybody's interested, be sure you get a copy. That year, 1996, I guess, that year, the New Orleans tourist newspaper hailed House of Broel's Victorian Mansion at 1508 St. Charles Avenue as one of the city's most romantic special flavors. But despite such accolades, I was ready to bid farewell to the building. When I purchased the mansion, I did so to save it from demolition and had turned it into a full-scale dollhouse. I spent 20 years nurturing it. By November 1998, I finally sold it, and I appreciated the old saying about a man and his boat. The two happiest days he has with it is the day he buys it and the day he sells it. I was so excited to see my picture on the front page of the newspaper dressing a bride, September 6, 2001. I thought to myself, how wonderful it is to be living at a time when weddings just get to make front page news because there is no bad news. How ironic, because it was just days before 9/11. The front of House of Broel, the day after Hurricane Katrina, I stayed with the house and fed the police with food that I had from my 4 freezers by candlelight. Following my annual January Wedding of the Year bridal show was held at Lakeside Shopping Center because our former location, the Fairmont Hotel, was badly damaged and we didn't know when it would reopen. We had a fantastic turnout. In fact, more people attended than I thought were still in the greater New Orleans area. People were ready to see some beauty and style to temporarily forget their troubles. I felt privileged to be one of the people able to bring glamour, fashion, and romance back to a city that needed love so much. For the dramatic finale I played, Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans? By local fans down. During the song I read, yes, we all know what it means to miss New Orleans, but we are a strong group of people here in our town with a tough, positive spirit. We have survived Spanish, French, and Yankee occupation, yellow fever, and malaria epidemics, fires, floods, riots, and privateers. Formosan termites have been cheering for the losing Saints football team for 39 years. House of Broel is on its way back, and I'm proud to be part of rebuilding New Orleans, one wedding at a time. And here's write-ups by the Times-Picayune for the wedding book, Wind Blown but Still Beautiful, and then they did an article, Disaster Can't Keep a Good Wedding Down. Again, I was happy for the press. Now, 2009 was a very good year. I hope you all have seen pictures up here. We did a fantastic bridal show in September at the newly reopened and remodeled Roosevelt Hotel for the benefit of the overture to the culture season. I started out with a lavish patron party that introduced a stunning fashion show that began with a model wearing this magnificent antique Japanese kimono. The finale featured a surprise wedding. I married one of the models to her groom right there on stage. It was a completely magical evening and one that everyone needed after being shut down after the storm. I think that couple is here in the audience somewhere. Hey, there you go. November 6th, I did the grand opening of Beyond All Boundaries at World War II Museum and had my picture taken with Tom Hanks. the after party for Sandra Bullock November 19th for her premiere of The Blind Side, and I had my picture taken with her. 2011, Sheriff Marlon Gutzman presented me with the Louisiana Legend Award October 16th, and in 2014, Fashion Week New Orleans presented this award to me. In 2014, and it states, Bonnie Broel, in recognition of your many achievements and contributions to the support of the Southern fashion industry. The gown I wore to accept that award, I also wore to MC the Crew of Stars Ball fashion show on Friday, January 26, 2018, at the Jefferson Performing Arts Center. I hope you all noticed that wonderful, handsome man that escorted me out here. Sitting right over here, this is Marshall Harris, and this is Carl Mack. And these two gentlemen put on a fabulous party every year for the Groove Stars. And if anyone's interested in getting more information, I have a sign-in sheet there for you to sign up and just give your name and your email address, and they'll send you information. It's a really fun group of people. The event this year, I think, is going to be 125 for the event, and it's going to be really fun. So I think you told me where's it?
Thank you. Yes, that's going to be. What's that?
Where's it?
We're looking at Chateau Estates Country.
Chateau Estates Country Club. Okay, and then finally, as we all know, we have suffered through 2 terrible years of COVID-19, and I'm so glad it's almost over. So anyway, I think that this is a marvelous picture. I have pictured here an amazing couple that didn't let anything stop them from having the wedding of their dreams. They are Sarah O'Fellon and Elliot Montville, who finally got married April 2nd, 2022. They originally booked their wedding September 28, 2019 for a wedding date of October 16, 2020. Then they rescheduled for May 8, 2021. And finally, a year later, April 2nd, 2022. I am sure they will live happily ever after. They deserve it. No one becomes a success by themselves. I have been blessed with many wonderful employees, friends, and family who have helped me through the years. I don't know if my electrician's here. Kenny, are you here? Kenny is the most wonderful man in the whole world. He always comes when I ask. And Lucy's on a cruise. I've also introduced you to Carl Mack and Marshall, okay, who they give me entertainment all year long. How can you ask more than that, huh? And Frank Stansberry, who always puts whatever craziness I'm up to on his email. Like this year, and Margarita Bergen.
Hey!
He has allowed me to present my information at her luncheons. My son Albert for his computer skills, and of course, my 40-year friend, Cheryl Wilder. And my new friends, Rhonda, Rhea, Denise, and Susan. I am very fortunate that I have been able to surround myself with fantastic people. That's my truest success. Hurricane Ida. I marvel over the strength of the New Orleans citizens who do not complain as they rebuild their homes and businesses. This work takes more courage than just starting out. I said as much to a friend who was gone. Bonnie, you know all about that. You've been rebuilding all your life. When she said this, I smiled. Yes, I've been doing this all my life. Each new day I work to rebuild and restore what has become obscured or damaged overnight. I rebuild my spirit, my hopes, and my dreams. I restore my peace of mind and my faith, and I'll do the same tomorrow. Life is rebuilding. Life is restoring. With passion, patience, perseverance, and flexibility, I am able to maintain peace as I go on with my life. And in the end, I'll find a new place to begin and dream again. And now it is time for me to find someone else to dream along with me. So if anybody's interested in carrying on this wonderful work, please let me know after the show. Thank you so much for your time.